We've seen time and time again that there's certain indicators to suggest an upcoming TV show or movie is going to be a financial failure for the studio. Like one of the prime examples of this is just the fact that the studio is spending too much money in order to make it, because that means they have a bigger hurdle they have to clear in order to be profitable. We got this article coming out last summer from Forbes saying how Disney's upcoming Star Wars show, The Acolyte, spent $49 million alone on just the pre-production phase. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be an absolute failure because they're spending a lot of money on the pre-production phase. After all, it's a new Star Wars property that they're trying to produce, doing something different than they've done before. But still, $49 million on just the pre-production phase alone is still quite a bit. But now it's gotten kind of worse because we gotten more numbers on what they actually spent for the whole series, and it's not really looking good for The Acolyte. A report from the New York Times indicates that Star Wars The Acolyte has a budget of $180 million for 8 episodes, or an average spend of $22.5 million per episode. Just to put that into perspective, here's the budget of other Disney Plus Star Wars shows. You got Obi-Wan Kenobi. They spent a reported, where is that at? $90 million for the whole season, at around $15 million per episode for that season. That was the cheapest series to make so far. Ahsoka, I think that was another... 12.5 million. So not another 15 million, 12.5 million. Book of Boba Fett, I know they spent around 15 million per episode. Yep, right here, 15 million per episode for Book of Boba Fett. Mandalorian, that was another one that cost around 15 million per episode. Where does it say? Right here, 15 million an episode for Mandalorian. And you can even go down Acolyte. It says it's projecting that to be the number 2 on this list because this article was made several months ago. Andor is the most expensive Disney Star Wars show to date. And it says it costs between $15 and $25 million per episode. So like I was saying at the start of this video, it's looking like The Acolyte is going to rival even Andor as far as the most expensive Disney Star Wars shows. And actually going back to this, you can think like it doesn't even have the benefit of having any legacy characters. At least with Andor, he was in a popular Star Wars movie, but still that show didn't do too well at all, even though they are getting a second season of that. I think they're hoping that it had enough goodwill that maybe people will actually watch it in the second season if they didn't watch it in the first one. But The Acolyte doesn't even have any characters that people can kind of hang their hat on. Something like the Book of Boba Fett, that was something that was expected to be a little bit more popular because he's a character from the original trilogy. But apparently at that time, audiences have pretty much checked out of Star Wars. Even something like Obi-Wan was a decent enough show, was well received, but it did so badly that they're not even getting a second season of that. And that was something that cost significantly less to produce than The Acolyte. Jumping back to the article, the budgetary figures includes the previously mentioned $49.2 million spent on pre-production, which means that the remaining $130.8 million was divided between production and post-production costs. In terms of how the $180 million spent on The Acolyte Season 1 compares to the budgets on other Star Wars shows, Skeleton Crew came in at $136 million for unspecified number of episodes, while Andor Season 1 is the most expensive Star Wars show by far with a $250 million spend for 12 episodes. And it's not just the budget that this show has working against it either, because right now we got some high up people over at Lucasfilm kind of priming some excuses to get those ready for when this show does fail. They can basically just point to the same group of people and say like, oh, it's just bigotry and other stuff like that. Like, take this statement from former Harvey Weinstein personal assistant and The Acolyte showrunner Leslie Headland. Hear what she had to say. As a fan myself, I know how frustrating some Star Wars storytelling in the past has been. I stand by my empathy for Star Wars fans, but I want to be clear. Anyone who engages in bigotry, racism, or hate speech, I don't consider a fan. So, the no true Scotsman fallacy, but still, just listen to this for a moment too, because she never specifies what she considers bigotry, racism, or hate speech, or anything like that. And I'm thinking that she's just kind of leaving it vague, because that means if there's any person within these groups represented in the show, then if people have any criticism, even though she said in the past that, yes, there's legitimate criticism for some Star Wars things that's been made, but if you have a person within these groups within that show or movie, well, then any criticism could be chalked up to racism, bigotry, or hate speech, or whatever she's going to call it. And I'm pretty sure that's something that she's going to do. And this isn't just from Leslie Headland either. Lucasfilm studio boss Kathleen Kennedy has kind of made similar statements in the recent past in regards to Star Wars, pretty much since she took over the franchise. Lucasfilm CEO Kathleen Kennedy has stepped out in support of The Acolyte, addressing sexism in the Star Wars fandom. And of course she's going to support The Acolyte because it's her studio that's producing it. I can't imagine the president of a studio would be like, yeah, this show that we have coming out that we're spending a ton of money on, yeah, it's going to be crap or anything like that. It's like, no, she's going to try to find any way to spin it because that's kind of her job. The next Star Wars TV show, The Acolyte, has already proved controversial, in a large part because its creator Leslie Headland is a gay woman and the show will feature lesbian characters. You see what I mean about how they're trying to preemptively create excuses for why the show is likely going to fail? Because the criticism surrounding Leslie Headland has nothing to do with the fact that she's a gay woman. People really don't care about that type of thing. It has to deal with the fact that every interview and talk that she gives on The Acolyte, she mentions that she's a queer woman and she wanted to insert that in The Acolyte to feel represented, because then it makes The Acolyte seem less like an actual Star Wars property for the fans and more like her own personal fan fiction. And audiences don't really want to watch the personal fan fiction of someone whose only claim to fame is being the personal assistant to a convicted rapist. But still, if you're a bit more of a realist, and people who complain about this woke agenda, they're not necessarily complaining about represented groups in various properties. They're complaining about studios using these groups as shields, because if a studio is setting out to try to insert their own shields and kind of create excuses like kind of embedded in the show or in the movie, and it suggests that the studio itself doesn't have much confidence in it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be trying to create excuses just from the get-go like they're doing with this. And it's kind of silly to see them try to say like, oh, well, Star Wars fans are racist and other things like that. Like we saw when it came to Obi-Wan, where they're saying like, oh, people who didn't like it were just racist because they had a black female in it, as if there hasn't been black characters in Star Wars before. And that's why I think that was one of those situations where no one who was really a longtime Star Wars fan actually believed that. There were certain segments of the audience and a lot of the shills out there in the media who were trying to push that because that was just the talking point they were given. But I don't think anyone sincerely believed that, because it was blatantly obvious that it wasn't the case. And I'm thinking a lot of the excuses that they're coming out for with The Acolyte is pretty much all the same. Like, I guess we haven't had a gay person. Well, there was kind of that gay kiss in Rise of Skywalker that they were conveniently able to edit out for the Chinese release. But still, I don't think a lot of people care about that sort of thing, especially if it actually works with the plot. What people criticize a lot of this woke agenda for is when that kind of agenda interferes with the storytelling. That's something I've brought up in the past before. Like, I don't care about various characters of various groups as long as it fits with the story, but it doesn't seem like that's what they're trying to do with this. It seems like Leslie Headland is just trying to push her own personal agenda. And that's why it doesn't really work for a Star Wars property or any type of media when you're setting out to actually send a message first before having an entertaining story. But let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. Do you think The Acolyte's going to be a success, or do you think it's going to be another Disney Star Wars flop? Comment below, let me know. And if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And don't forget to like and share the video because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.